Hello, everyone. Welcome to First Fridays, a webinar series about the business of being a spiritual writer. These are informal conversations that take place on the first Friday of every month. Today, our guest is our good friend, Sophfronia Scott. Sophfronia holds a BA in English from Harvard and an MFA in writing from Vermont College of Fine Arts. She began her career as an award-winning magazine journalist for Time magazine, and she has published several books across multiple genres and through different publishers. So I think that will, add interest to our conversation. And her latest novel is Unforgivable Love. Sophfronia also teaches at Regis University's Mile High MFA and Bay Path University's MFA in Creative Nonfiction. And Sophfronia has served as a featured speaker at many of the different Writing for Your Life and Publishing in Color conferences. And we welcome her this morning from Connecticut at a friend's house where they actually have power.
Yes.
So welcome, Sophfronia.
Thank you, Brian.
So let me get to, there are a number of different things that I want to talk about with Sophfronia. Why don't we start off with, I said a little bit about your previous work, but why don't you go into that a little bit more detail? And if there's anything new that you can tell us about, that'd be great as well.
Well, like you mentioned, I write both fiction and nonfiction. So there's always that I know you've asked me about this before, about that balance of working between the two genres. But sometimes it's just about the spaces, where can I fit in certain things? So October was all about finishing 2 essays, one of which is going to appear in the spring issue, the March-April issue of Yankee magazine. I'm about to start, I'm working on a nonfiction book, but because I haven't signed the contract for it yet, I'm thinking I might get in some work on a novel that I'm working on, because I don't know if you know, today's November 1st, so it's NaNoWriMo, which is that whole event where people try to write the first draft of a novel in 1 month. And so I'm thinking, wow, can I try to get this first draft of this novel out this month and then work on the nonfiction book after that? So I'm going to see if I can do that and sneak that in. But that's how I do. I go back and forth between things.
Well, I'm not surprised. I know you're an extremely hard worker, so it doesn't surprise me that you've got several things that you're juggling at once. So let's talk about some of the business aspects of this whole writing world. And first, let's start with agents. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you found your first agent?
Well, my first agent is my agent. I've had the same agent for many, many years. I actually found not her directly, because she was actually an assistant to the firm that I originally signed with. And I met the head of that firm at a reunion event at my college. So I went to Harvard, and I was at a commencement activity for the reunion classes. And there I met a man named John Taylor Williams, who at the time was the head, he's a lawyer, he was the head of the publishing, the agency end of a legal firm called Palmer and Dodge that was based in Boston. And a friend introduced me to him and said, "This guy's your agent." And we sat down at lunch and had a conversation about my first novel, which I was only just beginning at that time. But he wrote to me after the activities were over and said, "When you're ready to show something, I'd be happy to read it." So I spent a couple of months getting together the first 5 chapters and a synopsis of that novel, and I sent it to the agency, and they accepted it. And Brittany, who is my agent now, was just becoming an agent, and she was assigned to me, and I became her first sale. Now, the thing I want to point out about this, Brian, I know, when someone asks me a question like that, they usually want to hear about, did I write query letters? How did I go about finding my agent? How did I make the pitch? I want to point out that a lot of times, and I know this is hard for people who don't live in, big cities or whatever, a lot of times these things happen when you meet people in person and you make these connections in person, which is what's so wonderful about the events that you organize, is that you give people the opportunity to meet editors and agents in person. And often, that's where you're most likely going to have something happen. Now, that doesn't mean you can't write query letters and find an agent, but people want to work with people that they know, like, and trust. And you just get to that point a lot more quickly when you meet someone in person. So that's how I got my agent. I met someone in person.
It's so amazing how different everyone's story is, their journey right through writing. But one of the common threads that's been on every one of these interviews that we've done has been exactly what you said. Relationships and meeting new people, networking is just so crucial, so important.
Yeah, it's you get to not only talk about what you do, you get to learn about the person who would be handling your work. What do they cover? What are they excited about? What do they like to read? And you're more likely to figure out whether or not this person is the right connection, because otherwise you're trying to figure this out from looking at lists, from looking at websites, and you're making guesses, and you're sending work out that you don't even know is appropriate for what that agent wants. And the wonderful thing about my agent is that I've been able to watch her grow in this field. So now she's got her own firm along with a couple of other agents. It's called the Book Group in New York City. And if you look at that website, they have a fabulous, list of clients. So you have no idea where an agent is going to end up or where, they're going to go. So you maintain those relationships, and you have no idea where they're going to take you.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about how you and your agent work together as you're pitching a new book.
Well, it's a different process for fiction and nonfiction. So with the fiction, especially, she will read drafts of the novel, right? So it's not that I finish a book and send it to her and she sends it out. She knows, what is marketable. She will know, and she's also got a good editing eye. So she will know whether or not the book is just ready to go out on submission. So I trust her eye and her ear. And if she will suggest, well, let's try this, or maybe this opening could be like this, I will work with that. So it's almost like an editor relationship in the beginning. Then after that, it's about understanding where the book can be best placed. Now, some of this is me understanding what she does, and at the same time, my agent understanding my own personal goals, because she doesn't necessarily represent a lot of the faith writing that I do. But if something like my most recent book, I do feel is in a commercial realm, and if she agrees with that, then she is open to moving into that realm herself and learning, figuring out who those editors are, especially in the bigger commercial publishing houses, and helping me to place that work. We actually had a conversation with an editor when we were pitching this particular book, and we did a Zoom meeting. So Brittany and I and this editor on a meeting just like you and I are. And it was amazing to me to hear about me through Brittany's voice, to hear her say, well, Sophfronia is this type of writer, and she has these types of goals, and this is who she is in the writing world. So we are looking for a platform that will not only support the book, but support who she is becoming as a writer. And hearing that, because I don't always know, like, wow, does she really understand what I'm trying to do here? But to hear that was so exciting and gratifying. It's like, oh, wow, okay. And I even said to the editor, now you know why she is my agent, right? So you want somebody who not only knows you, but is excited about your work, understands what you're trying to do, because it's really more than just selling a book, right? It is about shaping a career and your future writing life.
Well, it's an amazing relationship that you've got there. It sounds like it's been very, very deep and valuable.
Absolutely.
So once a book deal is signed, how how does your agent stay involved through the course of the rest of the book development and launch?
She is, and I learned this with my novel. She is sort of the mediator when there are difficult conversations going on. So, for example, I wasn't happy with some of the titles that the publishing house was suggesting for my novel. So that conversation, so I didn't make those complaints to my editor. I had that conversation with Brittany, and she was the one who sort of was the middle person who mediated those conversations and helped us come to an agreement and how we came to a title that we were all happy with.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about editors and publishing houses. And as I mentioned early on, you've had the experience of working with several different, quite different publishing houses. Mm-hmm. And then obviously each with their own editors. So would you like to tell us a little bit about kind of how that has worked, what that's looked like?
Well, editors are editors. I think that's not really different between a big publishing house and a small publishing house. An editor is going to help you shape your work, may have ideas for it, and you ideally will be in a conversation with that editor. Now, with a novel, for example, with my most recent novel, that was a finished book when it came to her. So we were mainly talking about editorial changes. The editor I'm working on with my new nonfiction book project, that book was sold on proposal. So she and I are actually having our first meeting next week to go over our thoughts about the book, just to make sure that we are on the same page about the type of book that I'm going to be writing over the next couple of months, and how we're going to check in with each other, and just how we're going to stay on track as this book comes together. But the editor, again, just like with the agent, the editor is someone who is excited about this project. So you don't want to be in a situation, I know some writers are kind of scared of editors, and they want to hide from them and not really send anything to them until there's a deadline. But this is someone that you want to see as a partner, someone that you can bounce ideas off of, or if you're stuck, get the person on the phone and talk something through. But this is someone who's going to help you make this project better and not take it away from you, so it's something that is not yours.
So have you ever considered self-publishing a book? Maybe something that wasn't fit for, a traditional publisher?
Brian, I have self-published a book. So
I didn't realize that.
Yes, it was actually 10 years ago, because I'm writing something about, I had to write something recently about my life 10 years ago. And it occurred to me it was 10 years ago that book came out. But I used to have a business where I taught entrepreneurs how to write books to promote their businesses. And most entrepreneurs self-publish those books. So I wrote a book about that process, and I self-published it as a model for my clients. This is how it's done. And the book was not only an example, but the book was the how-to. It was called Doing Business by the Book. So that was specifically for that activity. I try to explain to people that the choice to self-publish has to do with your own goals. So it was like that book was never a book that I was going to try to publish in a big mainstream way, because I'm showing my clients how to do the thing that they are going to be doing. So, that was a very specific thing. Other writers may self-publish because they feel that it's the only way that they can own the book. Or maybe they have an audience already and they feel that they want to keep more of the money when the book is sold. There are many different reasons to self-publish. I can only say that for writers that you have to understand what your reasons are, do your research, and act accordingly.
So let's switch gears and talk about making a living as a writer. And without, asking you to get into anything private, can you tell us a little bit about what other income generating activities besides just book royalties that you have?
Well, you know, Brian, the thing about making a living as a writer is that it's not like the book royalties are terrible or the book advances are terrible. It's the timing thing that's the problem. So a book, you may get a book contract and you may get an advance, but you don't get that advance all at once. A lot of writers don't realize that if they haven't sold a book yet. So you will get part of that advance when you sign the contract. You will get part of the advance when you turn in the manuscript, and you will get part of the advance when the book is actually published. Some publishers do that in those 3 payments, some do it in 2. So that's the problem, is that the money doesn't come in a timely way. So it's, what do you do in the meantime? So I teach. So I teach in 2 MFA programs, as you mentioned, and I also do speaking engagements. I've been visiting writers at various places, and I also do my own workshops. So I think you know that I just did my first workshop in Italy in September. So to me, I like those types of activities because they keep me engaged in the literary writing world, and I get to talk with people who write the things that I like to write. I get to meet people who edit and publish the types of things that I write. I say this because 10 years ago, when I was doing things with entrepreneurs and teaching entrepreneurs, that took me away from my own writing life. So I was involved in a very different type of writing. It didn't allow me time or inspiration to do my own writing. So I had to stop doing that. Even though I was making a living doing that, it really didn't make me happy, and it didn't serve my writing life.
I think that's a really important point, and I try to stress that for earlier stage writers that I talk to too, about, you know, finding other avenues of activity and income that are very complementary and very high degree of overlap with your writing work, and because they feed off each other in multiple ways. So thank you for saying the same thing, because it just totally makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, you know, one of my MFA programs, you know, allowed me to meet the editor of a magazine, and then to have him say, well, you know, he saw my essays because they had been taught in that class, and to say, well, can you write something for us? And so, you know, that wouldn't have come about if I wasn't teaching in this realm.
So one of the things I should have mentioned earlier on, if anybody has a question, there's a chat function that you can open up a little window that will allow you to ask questions. So, you know, feel free to do that at any time. We'll try to get to them toward the end. So let's switch gears again and talk about platform. Yes. So obviously an increasingly important aspect of being a writer. What are the ways that you personally have found to be the most effective in terms of growing your platform?
You know, I forget who told me this, but I've learned that you have to show up places. You have to be somewhere, and you have to be somebody. So not only do I, you know, go and teach and do all of these various things, I tell people about them. I'm very active in social media. I have found that it helps to communicate with people on a regular basis. And the tricky thing about platform is to find a way to do that. That doesn't take up a lot of time. I have, just this past year, well, last year I started doing it. I started recording these videos called Your Morning Walk with Sophfronia.
Which are great, by the way. I love, you know, sharing those with people.
Thank you. And, you know, in January of this year, I made a commitment to myself that, you know, I should just do these each week. And so it's worked out. You know, I have managed to record a video every single week so far this year, and I post them on my blog. So that way I'm also keeping up that aspect of my website without taking up too much time. And I found that a lot of people do like them. So I'm hearing from people that I, you know, didn't realize were watching these things. And so I like to find a way to keep in touch with people, like these videos, that are personable, that are authentic. Now, it's starting to lead to other things that I have to pay attention to with my time. So for example, I realized that people would want to be in a forum like this with me. And I said, okay, well, maybe I should do a live Zoom meeting. And I did it just a couple of weeks ago. And there were a lot of people on the call and they were all excited about it. And someone said, will you be doing these regularly? Oh, man. Like, do I have the time to do that? How would I do that? And so now I'm thinking, okay, I'm always of the mind that if someone asks, then there is a need. And so I should try to see what happens if I can fulfill it. So I'm going to try, we'll see. I'm going to try to do these meetings once a month. We'll see. But then you have to let people know when you're doing something like this, you have to let people know that it's happening. So it's like, okay, that means I have to be more frequent with my newsletter. I don't do a regular newsletter. It's like, okay, I'm going to have to do a monthly newsletter now. I used to do a newsletter every week back in like ages ago, and it takes a lot of time. So I'm like, okay, now I'm going to do a weekly newsletter, and I'll tell people about this. And I'm constantly thinking about how can I do these things so that they take up the least amount of time. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm still working on this, Brian.
Well, you're really good, Sophfronia, juggling multiple things. It's always been one of the areas of your skill that I've been impressed with. And I know I've talked to several folks about what helps me in that regard, which is just how I organize my calendar and how I prioritize, whether it's month by month, week by week, day by day, year by year, depending upon what aspect of it is. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how you do that.
And Brian, that's exactly the way I've been thinking about this. I'm trying to figure out how to do this. It occurred to me that, okay, the thing about the morning walk videos, when they finally sort of stabilized for me, was when I used to say, okay, just as long as I can get it done in the week, I'll figure it out. But what really helps is to know that on Friday mornings, I'm doing my video. So I just started doing them on Friday mornings. And actually this morning I was able to do it, but I haven't uploaded it yet because we didn't have power, but I still made sure I got out there and I did a video this morning. So I'm thinking the same thing calendar-wise, like, okay, what if I do my newsletter on the 1st of each month? And if I do my live Zoom meeting, like maybe on the 3rd or 4th Saturday of each month. So when I have everything normalized in that way, I think it's a lot easier and things happen automatically. I'm not juggling in the way like you think, like, yes, it seems like I'm juggling things, but not really. I'm doing the things I need to be doing on a specific day.
And do you find that you need to schedule a lot of things pretty far out in advance?
When you say things in advance, do you mean like a video, or what do you mean?
Well, I mean, of the various, so I know for myself, when I'm planning a conference, I like to get some of the key elements of it lined up as much as a year in advance.
So the only thing that I do that has to be lined up in that way is the Italy retreat. So even though the Italy retreat just finished, we are already signing up people and getting ready for the next one. So that's the only thing that I have that's that far out. But my calendar does fill very quickly because of all of the different things that I do. I'm doing things with you already in the spring. I have things booked for next summer. So I'm very aware of my calendar because, yes, it's people book things. Like you said, you're doing planning, but that means people are asking for speakers. And so I have to be aware of my calendar going into the next year.
Right. So a lot of the folks, as you know, that watch our videos are relatively new writers. What kind of advice do you have for folks that are kind of in the early stages of the writing career?
Write first. Just write and keep writing, because it's interesting, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but I talk to people who are interested in writing, and they want to know about a lot of things that happen down the line, but they haven't completed something yet. And really, the questions that they're asking are kind of moot until you have something to show, until you have a completed manuscript, because you wouldn't even know who to approach because you don't know what the piece might be suitable for. And if you meet somebody, the first thing they're going to ask is, like the editor, like the agent I met, is they're going to ask you to show them something. And if you don't have it, and there's no way you're going to have it over the next year, then you might lose that person's interest. So this is all about the writing. Nothing matters if there is no writing. So I would say that the first priority is to find some way to make sure you are writing regularly. It doesn't have to be every day, because not everybody can write in that way, but you do have to be serious about your work, and you have to make sure that you are getting it done and improving.
So unless there's other questions that people have, I think that's going to wrap it up for us.
I'm going to add one more thing.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Make sure you're reading. Right, that's another thing. It's like, don't be a writer who says, oh, I don't read, or I don't read memoir. And I'm like, but you're writing a memoir. So what do you mean you're not reading? This is, and it's interesting because you don't think about it, that you're asking, if you don't read, then who are you expecting to read your work, right? If you're not a reader, you have to be engaged in the craft, not just for yourself, but for other writers as well. And you will learn and be inspired when you read other people's work. Brian, I've been listening to Madeleine L'Engle's journals, and I'm just blown away and totally inspired by her commitment to the writing craft. So I feel like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't read these journals years ago. So it's like you miss out on so much when you don't read. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. We should probably mention too that Sophfronia and I are both going to be participating in the Madeleine L'Engle conference, the initial Madeleine L'Engle conference coming up here very soon, November 16th in New York City.
Yes.
So there's still seats available for that if anyone is interested in participating. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yes, so am I.
So we have a question from Phoebe. She's saying, what questions do you ask yourself before taking on a commitment to make sure that it doesn't take away from your writing?
Okay. So I've been saying no lately to a lot of things. So that's a good question, Phoebe. It's important. You have to ask yourself, am I truly interested in this project? I was asked to edit an anthology, and the topic is something relevant to me. So it is something I could have done. But when I thought about it, I was like, okay, this is going to take a lot of time. Do I have the passion so that when things get really huge, will this be a burden? Or will it be a joy to sit down? It's like, oh, I finally get to work on this anthology. And unfortunately, that answer was no. I had an interest in this topic, but it wasn't a passion. So I said no. Now, this week, I've been asked to be a judge for the book awards for Estate's book awards. And that's exciting to me. Not only do I visited that state for the first time this year. I'm excited about what they do for their artists and for their writers. I'm excited to just be part of this process, and I'm honored that they've asked me. Now that's going to take some reading. I've got to read some books, because I'm one of the judges. But even now, I'm like, oh wow, I get to do this, right? That's a yes. That's a yes. I'm going to do this. So that's how you decide, right? You have to have that feeling, that energy, so that it feels like a natural yes, and not like, oh yeah, I can't turn this down. All right, I better do this. So I hope that answers your question.
I think in a similar vein, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that you used to do like freelance editing too.
Yes.
You decided at one point in your career that you wanted to stop doing that and devote your time to your own published writing.
Exactly. Yeah. And that became a no for me, because it took up a lot of time, and it wasn't always productive necessarily, because that person wouldn't necessarily move on with the project, right? So that book, they didn't even try to publish it or something like that. So I'm just really wary of where I put my energy. So I decided to put that energy into my own writing and into my students' work.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think it served you well. So that'll wrap it up for today. Sophfronia, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I always enjoy speaking with you, interviewing you. Your wisdom, I think, is something that is greatly helpful for many people. So thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Our next First Friday will be the first Friday of December, December 6th, with author Erin Healy. So please plan to join us then. Thanks again, everybody.
All right. Take care.